Okay, so I'm going to be doing a video today on real reasons why EV owners are switching back to gasoline cars by Chase Car. I'll leave a link to the channel in the description. So let's go ahead and do it. And well, I'll subscribe. Let's do it. So let's take a look.
Once frontrunners with the noble idea of saving the environment, early adopters don't share that much enthusiasm about the electric revolution anymore. Instead, the latest study shows that 46% of EV owners in America plan to get back to gasoline. In other words, EV owners have had enough and are now switching back to gas cars, and here are 6 big reasons why. Number 6. Charging anxiety. A recent study from the EY Mobility Consumer Index found that only 34% of Americans plan to buy an EV as their next car, which is 14% down from last year when 48% of Americans plan to buy an EV as their next vehicle. But what's even more intriguing is the fact that more and more EV owners are getting back to gas-powered cars. Research from California found that
So I'm going to pause right here. It makes total sense. I mean, you're buying a car. EVs on average cost like 70,000 for like a decently priced EV, right? You could probably buy them used, but the big problem with EVs is there's just no infrastructure for them, right? I mean, you have to travel like 30 to 50 miles just to find a charging station near you sometimes because not every state has adopted these EV charging stations. So range anxiety, I think, is yeah, totally real. The infrastructure is a huge problem with electric vehicles.
every fifth EV owner gets back to internal combustion, while the recent McKinsey survey found that 46% of EV owners plan to get back to gas-powered cars. And when talking about reasons, charging anxiety is certainly one of the first things that come to mind. Simply, governments from all over the world did so many things to encourage their citizens to participate in the electric revolution, but never managed to develop an adequate EV infrastructure. Aside from
Yeah, so he's pretty much hitting what I was saying. And the other thing I wanted to touch on real quick is there's also like what manufacturers do to make the car more sellable, because that's the whole point. They're trying to sell a car to you, right? They want you to buy their product. So they're testing these cars and they're going, oh, in ideal conditions, you can get up to 350 miles to the charge, up to 400. But they're not taking into factors like people like they're not taking factors of people who live in really cold states or really hot states because the weather can greatly affect how well a battery performs, and that's a huge problem. So, but I'm sure they'll touch on that.
China, California, and a few more places on our planet, there are simply not enough chargers around,
Right.
which causes the so-called range anxiety, where drivers are in constant fear that they won't have enough battery to get to the next charging station. But even if they make it, troubles won't stop, as recent surveys found that EV ownership is far from flawless, even in areas with great infrastructure. For example, one Berkeley study found that every fifth charging attempt in California ends up unsuccessful for a variety of reasons. Home charging is problematic as well, as overnight charging is often not enough to charge the battery completely and enjoy the maximum range. Of course, that can be solved with a level 2 charger, but this solution comes at a higher cost, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Right.
Number 5.
Well, and the other thing that is not being mentioned here is a lot of these EVs, I think almost all of them, they have lithium ion batteries, which is very expensive to produce. And a lot of people think that they're like being green by buying this because, oh, no emissions. Well, they don't even factor how the thing was built. You still have to make the steel to form into a body. You still have to mine the lithium and all the nickel and cobalt and iron to make the battery. So I would argue you're doing more damage to the environment than helping. Sure, you have to manufacture the same vehicle, and yes, combustion engines do create pollution, but you also don't have to go dig 20 million miles to the center of the earth to go get nickel, cobalt, and iron. Yes, there's still batteries in internal combustion cars, but they're much smaller than an EV. An EV is like this whole bottom of the car is like the battery, and you have to protect that battery from any impacts, from any leaks or dents. If that battery gets punctured, you're screwed. You know, those batteries are very dangerous if they're punctured or damaged in any way because they can start fires. Henceforth, there's a lot of EV fires.
Running costs. Many EV owners feel like they've been tricked because if there's a thing EV sellers have been promising all these years, that would be low running costs. When we talk about the benefits of owning an EV, cheap electricity is definitely one of the first things that come to mind, but
Right.
are things really like that? According to many EV owners, they're not. Because EVs are cheap to charge only when using home electricity. Things are quite the opposite in the case of public charging stations, and the fact is that a vast number of EV owners don't have an option for home charging. They don't own a
Right.
garage or don't have any other off-street solution. And since on-street charging still hasn't been figured out, their only solution is to use public chargers. And the thing with public chargers is that they're expensive. Sometimes they can even cost more than gasoline. Not to mention,
Right.
owners of these stations use all kinds of tricks to take a few more bucks from your pocket. The so-called idle fee is one of them. Well, the actual price can vary depending on the time of the day. All this leads to the
So about this, you can't blame the person trying to make a buck off of these people. Like what you have to blame, because it's like that famous saying. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but there's a saying in the West, people who during the gold rush, right? They were like, oh, everyone's trying to mine gold and get rich. Well, guess what what some people were doing? They weren't mining. They were just selling the tools to mine. And they were getting rich that way. So they're just trying to make money, and they're providing a service that people want. Like, you can't blame the people. Really, what you should be blaming is just the fact that EVs are still just such a new technology, and the government's trying to enforce it on people. Like, they're incentivizing people to go buy these cars when there's no infrastructure. It hasn't really been proven. The technology is very expensive to produce, therefore, a lot of EVs are extremely high in price. I think the cheapest EV I've ever seen that was new, I'm not talking about used, new was about $40,000. You can get a gas powered car for half that price, 20, 25,000, maybe even 30,000. So if you're saving $10,000, that's literally your gas car. That's your gas costs in a whole year. Usually only spending like 2 grand a whole year if you're getting a good, you know, good car that's getting good gas mileage. And you don't have to worry about where am I gonna fill up my car because it takes gas. There's gas stations everywhere. So, the problem that I think is there's just no infrastructure. There's no point in having an electric vehicle, and when you have these 20 million volt batteries that need so much damn electricity just to be full, that you have to install like $5,000 chargers in your home, if you can even do that, it becomes a huge problem. It starts to add up real quick.
conclusion that EVs are not exactly all that cheap to run. Gemma Tognini, I hope I got your name right, a blogger from Australia, did some math and found that she managed to save no more than 524 Australian dollars during 12 months of owning a Tesla, which would be around 355 US dollars with the current tax rates, which means less than
Okay.
30 bucks a month. So how many months do you think you would need to offset the extra cash you paid for your EV?
Right.
Number 4, real world autonomy. EV
And I'm sorry to keep pausing it, but the other thing about EVs is they also did a study that said EVs really don't start becoming environmentally beneficial until you hit about the 100,000 mile mark with them. And there's a lot of studies, and you can go look this up yourself. You don't have to take my word for it. Go do the research. But there's a lot of studies that I've seen where your average EV buyer is trading in their vehicle around 60, 70,000 miles. And tell you why they're doing that, because that's usually when the battery has to be replaced, and the battery on these things are like 8 to 10 grand to replace. So it's not just infrastructure, you also have technicians. You need techs to do this stuff, because your average consumer is not going to know how to replace a battery. If you don't have techs that know how to work on these cars, that's also going to rise the cost of labor, parts, everything. So I guarantee you there's probably a lot of EV owners that have taken their car in for a repair and have been like, holy crap, I would not have had to have paid 9 grand to get my car fixed if I had a gasoline powered car. You can swap an engine and a transmission for that same amount. you you can get like a heavily used engine for like 2 grand, it depending on the car, like a 4 cylinder for like 2 grand, and then parts and labor is like another three. You're still saving like $4,000-$4,000.
Owners want to get back to combustion cars because they're disappointed in real-world electric autonomy. When you look at the EPA estimations and
all
manufacturer
about supply and
claims, it looks
demand.
like there's some pretty impressive EVs
know?
around. Although still not as autonomous as gas cars, they often offer more than 300 miles per charge,
That's the
which
thing that
seems
people,
plenty
I don't
enough for an
think they
average
understand.
driver. But then ownership begins and people realize that things are a bit different from reality. The max range can only be achieved in ideal conditions, and while that's
Exactly.
something we could also say for gas-powered cars, the fact is that EVs are way more vulnerable to outside factors.
Exactly.
Everybody knows about how cold weather drains the battery. Heat pumps come as a solution, but most manufacturers would charge you
Yeah.
extra to install them. Then comes heavy acceleration, high speed, and hill ascents, which all decrease the max range significantly. Electric trucks are
And to be fair, this does affect cars too. Like if you're going up a hill in a car, you're going to use more gas because you need more gas to go up that hill. You need more energy. But it's nowhere near as bad as an EV. Like you use that battery, all it is electricity. It has to put a lot of electricity into that motor that's pushing that vehicle up the hill. Therefore, it's consuming a lot more energy. So yeah, this is definitely right. I mean, your car is affected by cold weather, but at least you can start your car. You can go put your battery on a extension cord and plug it into your garage, and you'll be fine. And then if you like live in a really cold area, and then you can turn it on the next day and your battery will stay charged. You know, you can't really do that with an EV. What are you going to do? How are you going to do that? You can't plug anything into a battery to keep it charged. I guess you have to pray that your battery will stay charged, you know?
particularly vulnerable, as many tests have already shown, that an average trailer can easily cut 60% of the claimed range or even more.
Yeah.
But what most people neglect is
long.
that in most cases, EV owners don't have enough time to charge their batteries completely. Overnight charging is usually not enough, while fast chargers work well until the battery gets to about 80%. After
Yeah,
that, it could take
exactly.
hours, so in the vast majority of situations, EV owners are not able to use the full potential of the battery and get even close to the claimed max range.
Exactly. You just have to think of car batteries like a cell phone battery. If you use a supercharger, a fast charger on your cell phone battery, it heats it up significantly. And there's fail safes in that phone and in that charger that if it gets too hot, it stops that fast charging and it just starts slowly charging it to prevent the battery from being damaged. It's the same concept.
Number 3, reliability issues. Do you remember how EV makers used to claim that EVs are more reliable than gas-powered cars due to fewer moving parts? No one talks about superior reliability anymore because surveys found that EVs are actually 80% more problematic than gas-only counterparts. Software issues, battery and charging
Against new
issues,
tech.
build quality
New tech's
issues,
always
EV
gonna have
owners have had
issues.
enough and
Always.
want good combustion cars back.
This has been happening in combustion too. When they release a new model year, there's always a bunch of problems. I almost said the F word. There's always a bunch of flipping problems because these manufacturers, you have to realize from a business standpoint what they're going to choose. They're going to make these cars, right? And make millions of cars, and they're testing the cars. Like they know there's issues, and they go to the quality or whoever's in charge and they go, hey, we have all these problems. We haven't figured it out yet. What should we do? They go, well, how much is it going to cost us to fix it, right? Oh, it'll cost us 1.2 million. Oh, and we'll save 1.2 million if we just ignore it. Yeah. Okay, we're not going to fix it then because it's not worth it for us to fix it and have a good product because they can't make that money back. why
Stories
you're
about
seeing all
how
these cars
unreliable
come out and
EVs
they're
are
crap.
can be numerous.
'Cause
One
it's
Chevy Blazer
cheaper-
EV owner said
cheaper
his
for
car broke
companies to
after
release
just 28
garbage
hours of use
than
and
to,
left them stranded in rural Virginia.
make a good
Another owner
product.
posted on a Blazer EV forum that his SUV spent 3 weeks at the dealer only to be
How many people have 40 to 50 grand to just drop on a good car? And even if you do, you're not guaranteed a good quality product just because you spend more money.
told that the problem was with the body control module and that he would have to wait even more to get his electric Blazer
bad.
back. Even journalists had big problems with this Blazer, like when the crew from Edmunds found 24 faults after just 2 months of use. Other EVs may be less problematic,
That's
but still
insane.
suffer from so many different problems, and their owners feel sick of visiting dealers every now and then to
Well,
get their
you have
EV
a bunch-
fixed, just because on-air
all
updates can
cars
be
are
done
now
or
are
because some
computers.
other bigger
They're
or
just
smaller
computers on
issues.
wheels.
Early adopters had the first-hand opportunity to see how unreliable EVs can be,
Things
and
get
now they
hot.
say it's time to get back to proven
Software is not
technology.
coded correctly.
Number 2,
Things break.
depreciation. Cars are generally not considered the best investment around, but EVs have easily become the champions of depreciation. It's not like no one was expecting this. At first,
Right.
things were relatively under control. While the market average depreciation was around 38% over 5 years, EVs were at around 49%.
That's probably
And
another
then
huge
the
factor
price
for
war
EV
started.
owners.
Suddenly, Tesla and other EV makers started offering massive discounts on their models. For those who bought their EVs before the price slashes, their investments turned into a real disaster. At some point, depreciation was so
Yeah,
fast that an
that's the
average
problem.
EV would lose $600 of its value every day. Today,
Oh my
things aren't much
God.
better, as on
That's
average,
bad.
EVs tend to lose about half of their value in just 12
Oh my
months.
God.
Recently, Edmunds found a
That's
2022
insane,
Porsche
dude.
Taycan Turbo with just 10,000 miles,
Wow.
priced at $106,000, $50,000 below what it would have cost brand
Holy
new.
crap.
Then Wired found a fully loaded 2020 Taycan Turbo with just 5,000 miles, priced at $92,000, down $86,000 from the original price tag,
That's
which translates to $17 per mile in depreciation. Then Edmunds found another interesting example, a 2023 Polestar 2 with 10,000 miles with a trade-in value of $30,500, 40% down
you
from the
kidding
original
me?
price. Number 1.
So these EVs, on average, are losing half their price. So they sell them at like these super high-end luxury electric sports cars for like 200,000, and then they put 10,000 miles on, and then they only sell them for like 96,000. That's insane. That's a little over half. That's crazy.
Not as green as we thought.
And it's only a year
If we
old.
put all the troubles EV owners have had with their cars aside, there's still a good reason to own an electric car. They're still environmentally friendly, right?
To a
Well, it
degree.
turns out that things are not exactly black and
Yeah.
white, in that the actual sustainability of electric vehicles is at least questionable. And for many EV owners, the fact that they're not exactly saving the planet was enough to get back to internal combustion. Because while there are no direct exhaust emissions, electric cars can still do a lot of damage to the environment. First of all, there's the matter of carbon footprint during the production process. As you know, EVs are run by batteries, and batteries and
Yeah, this
other
is what he
electrical
was talking
components
about,
need
yeah.
lithium, nickel, cobalt, and many other rare earth elements to work.
Yep.
The problem with these rare earth elements is that they're not easy to find, and that their mining and extraction require a lot of carbon emissions. Not to mention that these mines often devastate the surrounding environment. Clearly, the production of electric cars leaves a much higher carbon footprint than the production of combustion cars. But that initial footprint would be offset at some point, at some mileage. After a certain number of miles, EVs would offset the initial damage, and after that, they would become greener than gas-powered cars with every new mile they make. The only problem is that this
Yeah, the only problem is people aren't keeping them for that long. They're not holding on to their EVs. They're getting rid of
happens
them.
only if we use renewable energy, electricity that comes from wind, sun, water, etc. And with the fact that 70% of the world's
Well, and then the huge problem with renewable energy that no one seems to want to talk about is the wind doesn't always blow. The sun doesn't always shine. These aren't reliable forms of energy. It sounds great, but if you need to power a whole country, you can't leave your energy
electricity,
to
which would
chances.
eventually end up stored in EV batteries,
Oh, we'll just gamble our energy reserves on Mother Nature.
still comes from fossil
You know,
fuels.
it sounds great, and it would. We just aren't there yet as a society.
Any
And this is
discussion
pretty
about
much
EVs
gone.
being sustainable is
The big problem with this energy, and this is the thing that people don't understand, is they go, well, why don't they put solar panels on electric vehicles? That way it can just continually recharge. The battery required to move this electric vehicle is massive. Solar panels do not generate that much electricity. They generate maybe enough to power a home, and your home's like maybe, I don't fucking know, 10, 15,000 watts. I'm no electrician. These are like 40 to 50,000 watt batteries. There's just no way you're going to keep that battery charged with the amount of energy it's requiring to move that vehicle. That's why no one's done it. It's not worth investing time and money. Companies have to invest time, money, and effort in building new products. That's why EVs are so expensive. This is new technology. It's never really been tested. It's never really been proven. The government incentivized these manufacturers to build these vehicles to move people away from gas-powered cars. But they didn't think about the infrastructure. They didn't think about the parts availability. These cars are gonna have to be repaired. They didn't think about the costs to make the vehicle. Electric vehicles need specialized tires for the amount of torque that they put down on the road. You can't just put a regular gasoline tire on the road and expect it to work. Like, I'm sure it'll work, but it would be a safety problem. You know, there's all these factors, and there's not enough techs. So if you go take your EV in, chances are the technician that's working on it is not going to have any idea how to work on it. There's not enough infrastructure. That is why gas is so cheap. It's been around for hundreds of years. We've had so much time to build an infrastructure, to make cheap parts, to manufacture things. We have gasoline powered engines down to an art. And the big problem with gas powered engines now is now there's modules in every damn thing in these cars. You've got a module for your radio, you got a module for your seats, you got modules for your backup, you got a module for your. And the more electric things you have in a car, the more prone and the more likely it is for failure. So you have all these fuses, you have a ton of fuses, you have a ton of, you know, that's the thing that your average consumer is not really going to look into because they don't care. They just want the product to work. But if you want to shop smarter, you need to start thinking, what do I want in my car? The simpler the car is, the less likely you're going to have issues, and the cheaper it's going to be because the manufacturer doesn't have to put a computer in your car. The manufacturer doesn't have to get microchips for your seats to be heated. The manufacturer doesn't have to have software uploaded in your dash so you can go listen to your internet radio, you know. But people don't want that. People don't want a simple car. They want cars that have the latest and greatest tech, that are cheap and reliable. But you can't have that. You can't have cheap, reliable, and like fast, like it's just not gonna work. If it's cheap and fast, it's probably not gonna be reliable. It's fast and cheap, it's probably gonna be not cheap, If it's fast and cheap, it's probably not gonna be reliable. If it's cheap quality, it's not gonna be fat, like you can't have all everything in a car. But anyways, I think this was a good video by Chase Car, and definitely I'm gonna leave the channel and the link in the description. Definitely give them a watch. Thank you.